little space called Point Roberts.
Welcome to the 2021 gathering. HowSpace is our online workspace where we will access all the upcoming workshops, morning plenary speeches, ask questions, and connect. Each morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we will log on to the plenary page to watch live keynotes and panels and have the opportunity to ask questions to our presenters. Make sure to click on the play arrow to start streaming the live video. To submit your questions during the Q&A periods, you can input text into the following chat box. We encourage you to reply and like others' comments. When we are beginning our daily workshops, they can be found in either the main menu or by navigating our drop-down menu. Once you select the workshop you're interested in joining, please follow the Zoom link provided or dial in details to participate. Thank you. We look forward to connecting, and if you have any questions regarding HowSpace, don't hesitate to reach out.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, bienvenue au rassemblement. HowSpace, c'est notre espace de travail en ligne où nous aurons accès à tous les ateliers à venir, aux plénières du matin, où nous pourrons aussi poser des questions et entrer en contact les uns avec les autres. Chaque matin à 11 h heure de l'Est, nous nous connecterons à la page des plénières pour regarder en direct les discours principaux et les panels. Nous aurons la possibilité de poser des questions à nos présentateurs. N'oubliez surtout pas de cliquer sur la flèche de lecture pour lancer la diffusion de la vidéo en direct. Pour soumettre vos questions pendant nos périodes de questions-réponses, vous pouvez saisir du texte dans la boîte de dialogue suivante. Nous vous encourageons à répondre et à aimer aussi les commentaires des autres. Lorsque nous commençons nos ateliers quotidiens, vous aurez la possibilité de les retrouver soit dans le menu principal, soit en naviguant dans notre menu déroulant. Une fois que vous aurez sélectionné l'atelier qui vous intéresse, suivez le lien Zoom fourni ou utilisez les informations de connexion téléphonique pour participer. Surtout, n'hésitez pas à nous envoyer un message si vous avez des questions concernant HowSpace. Merci, nous sommes vraiment impatients de vous retrouver.
Hi everyone, welcome to the 2021 gathering. HowSpace is our online workspace where we will access all the upcoming workshops, morning plenary speeches, ask questions, and connect. Each morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we will log on to the plenary page to watch live keynotes and panels and have the opportunity to ask questions to our presenters. Make sure to click on the play arrow to start streaming the live video. To submit your questions during the Q&A periods, you can input text into the following chat box. We encourage you to reply and like others' comments. When we are beginning our daily workshops, they can be found in either the main menu or by navigating our drop-down menu. Once you select the workshop you're interested in joining, please follow the Zoom link provided or dial in details to participate. Thank you. We look forward to connecting, and if you have any questions regarding HowSpace, don't hesitate to reach out.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, bienvenue au rassemblement. HowSpace, c'est notre espace de travail en ligne où nous aurons accès à tous les ateliers à venir, aux plénières du matin, où nous pourrons aussi poser des questions et entrer en contact les uns avec les autres. Chaque matin à 11 h heure de l'Est, nous nous connecterons à la page des plénières pour regarder en direct les discours principaux et les panels. Nous aurons la possibilité de poser des questions à nos présentateurs. N'oubliez surtout pas de cliquer sur la flèche de lecture pour lancer la diffusion de la vidéo en direct. Pour soumettre vos questions pendant nos périodes de questions-réponses, vous pouvez saisir du texte dans la boîte de dialogue suivante. Nous vous encourageons à répondre et à aimer aussi les commentaires des autres. Lorsque nous commençons nos ateliers quotidiens, vous aurez la possibilité de les retrouver soit dans le menu principal, soit en naviguant dans notre menu déroulant. Une fois que vous aurez sélectionné l'atelier qui vous intéresse, suivez le lien Zoom fourni ou utilisez les informations de connexion téléphonique pour participer. Surtout, n'hésitez pas à nous envoyer un message si vous avez des questions concernant HowSpace. Merci, nous sommes vraiment impatients de vous retrouver.
Hi everyone, welcome to the 2021 gathering. HowSpace is our online workspace where we will access all the upcoming workshops, morning plenary speeches, ask questions, and connect. Each morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we will log on to the plenary page to watch live keynotes and panels and have the opportunity to ask questions to our presenters. Make sure to click on the play arrow to start streaming the live video. To submit your questions during the Q&A periods, you can input text into the following chat box. We encourage you to reply and like others' comments. When we are beginning our daily workshops, they can be found in either the main menu or by navigating our drop-down menu. Once you select the workshop you're interested in joining, please follow the Zoom link provided or dial in details to participate. Thank you. We look forward to connecting, and if you have any questions regarding HowSpace, don't hesitate to reach out.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, bienvenue au rassemblement. HowSpace, c'est notre espace de travail en ligne où nous aurons accès à tous les ateliers à venir, aux plénières du matin, où nous pourrons aussi poser des questions et entrer en contact les uns avec les autres. Chaque matin à 11 h heure de l'Est, nous nous connecterons à la page des plénières pour regarder en direct les discours principaux et les panels. Nous aurons la possibilité de poser des questions à nos présentateurs. N'oubliez surtout pas de cliquer sur la flèche de lecture pour lancer la diffusion de la vidéo en direct. Pour soumettre vos questions pendant nos périodes de questions-réponses, vous pouvez saisir du texte dans la boîte de dialogue suivante. Nous vous encourageons à répondre et à aimer aussi les commentaires des autres. Lorsque nous commençons nos ateliers quotidiens, vous aurez la possibilité de les retrouver soit dans le menu principal, soit en naviguant dans notre menu déroulant. Une fois que vous aurez sélectionné l'atelier qui vous intéresse, suivez le lien Zoom fourni ou utilisez les informations de connexion téléphonique pour participer. Surtout, n'hésitez pas à nous envoyer un message si vous avez des questions concernant HowSpace. Merci, nous sommes vraiment impatients de vous retrouver.
Hi everyone, welcome to the 2021 gathering. HowSpace is our online workspace where we will access all the upcoming workshops, morning plenary speeches, ask questions, and connect. Each morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we will log on to the plenary page to watch live keynotes and panels and have the opportunity to ask questions to our presenters. Make sure to click on the play arrow to start streaming the live video. To submit your questions during the Q&A periods, you can input text into the following chat box. We encourage you to reply and like others' comments. When we are beginning our daily workshops, they can be found in either the main menu or by navigating our drop-down menu. Once you select the workshop you're interested in joining, please follow the Zoom link provided or dial in details to participate. Thank you. We look forward to connecting, and if you have any questions regarding HowSpace, don't hesitate to reach out.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, bienvenue au rassemblement. HowSpace, c'est notre espace de travail en ligne où nous aurons accès à tous les ateliers à venir, aux plénières du matin, où nous pourrons aussi poser des questions et entrer en contact les uns avec les autres. Chaque matin à 11 h heure de l'Est, nous nous connecterons à la page des plénières pour regarder en direct les discours principaux et les panels. Nous aurons la possibilité de poser des questions à nos présentateurs. N'oubliez surtout pas de cliquer sur la flèche de lecture pour lancer la diffusion de la vidéo en direct. Pour soumettre vos questions pendant nos périodes de questions-réponses, vous pouvez saisir du texte dans la boîte de dialogue suivante. Nous vous encourageons à répondre et à aimer aussi les commentaires des autres. Lorsque nous commençons nos ateliers quotidiens, vous aurez la possibilité de les retrouver soit dans le menu principal, soit en naviguant dans notre menu déroulant. Une fois que vous aurez sélectionné l'atelier qui vous intéresse, suivez le lien Zoom fourni ou utilisez les informations de connexion téléphonique pour participer. Surtout, n'hésitez pas à nous envoyer un message si vous avez des questions concernant HowSpace. Merci, nous sommes vraiment impatients de vous retrouver.
Hi everyone, welcome to the 2021 gathering. HowSpace is our online workspace where we will access all the upcoming workshops, morning plenary speeches, ask questions, and connect.
of us grew up believing that the poor would always be with us. We came to believe that ending poverty was a foolish dream. Then, Canada lifted more than 1 million Canadians out of poverty. Over 6 years, our poverty rate dropped from 15% to 11%. This was the lowest rate in recorded history. Why? Because we have poverty reduction plans. The Government of Canada and most provinces and territories have a plan. Cities Reducing Poverty is the largest network of its kind in the world. We have a plan. Many of our partners have plans to end homelessness, provide a basic income, end child poverty, end disability poverty, and to end working poverty. We need to unite these plans. Let's build a united plan. Together, we can end poverty. Join Tamarack and Mayor Naheed Nenshi online live from Calgary, May 5th and 6th, 2021. Learn more at endpovertyby2030.ca.
Good morning and welcome. We are honored to introduce you to Elder Wallace Axelson and Elder Florence Axelson, who will be our elders for our gathering over the next 2 days. Elders Wallace and Florence work with longtime Cities Reducing Poverty members, Vibrant Communities Calgary on Treaty 7 territory. It's important that we start with our opening blessing before doing anything else today so that we can start our time together in a good way. Over to you, Elders Wallace and Florence.
Oh, Jimmy, good. Just one correction. The last name is pronounced Alexson. I think you said Axelson.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, you've done away mugging it. That greeting says, how are you, my relatives? And normally when we start, this is what we do. As you know, we are all related. Everything that lives on this earth, planet Earth. We have a little bit of our Creator in each and every one of us. Right from the little bugs right up to the rocks. Everything in the universe. Anyway, I'll introduce myself first. I'm Elder Wallace Axelson. That's my Christian name. My native name, known to my people as well as my Creator, is Man of the Earth. That's how I say it in my Sutu language. And I should have said first off that my background is Sutu, Ojibwe, as well as Cree. That's my family. And we come from a place called Kakiwishtahau in southern Saskatchewan. Right off number 1 highway, there's a little town called Broadview, Saskatchewan. Just north of there is where we hail from. And we're prairie people. But saying that, it's such a beautiful place if you know where to look. If you're just driving down the highway, it's pretty flat. There's nothing there really, But it's a beautiful province. Anyway, I'm happy to be here. It makes my heart soar like a hawk to be able to come and say the blessing and meet everybody. So with that, I think we'll just go ahead and we're going to do the blessing. Did you have something you would like to add? Or?
Introduce myself as well. I just want to say good morning to everyone. It's a great morning, very nice and sunny here in Calgary. And I love Calgary. I've been here for quite a few years, but I do come from Saskatchewan originally. My name is Florence Axelson, and my Saulteaux Cree name is Niganikapu, which means someone who steps forward. And I've had that for quite a while. And we've come to enjoy our native heritage and started doing prayers and everything for for our people, to pray for everyone, especially in this time and condition that's going around this world. And we pray for all those people who are sick and even the ones who are in good health. We pray for all people and animals and who are hurting. So that's our way as Native people. So I just want to leave that with you all. Thank you so much for having me here. Be great. Thank you.
We'll get started. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a prayer. I'll start off in my language, and then as I go along, I'll be doing some of it in the English so that we all understand. Everybody understands English, I think. Anyways, and then I'm gonna end the session with a prayer song. And when I do this prayer song, I would like each and every one of us to go within ourselves as human beings and be thankful for everything that all the good things that happen in life, even all the bad things. You know, it takes everything to make this world go around, so to speak. So with that, I'll get started. We've done our smudge. We smudged everything and everybody, so I'm gonna just go ahead and start. Get your money too. You're the only one, Creator, that knows how to do everything for your people here on earth. I like to say a prayer today and ask for good things to happen for our people today. I want to ask good things to happen for our sessions here today. Everybody involved with this organization and all the organizations that are participating. We ask a blessing for everybody, each and every one of the people that are involved, all their families, right from the unborns to the great grandparents and on beyond. Even a blessing for all the ones that have left us and went to the other side already. Thank you for that. We ask you to help us with this session. Help us look forward to good things to happen with everybody involved here. I ask you that take care of us, Hey, that knows how to do it all. We ask you, help us, take care of us, look after us. Get you rich. Go in, go. I'm going to sing that prayer song now, and then we'll carry on from there. When I'm done, I'll finish with the prayer, and I'll say, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm going to be using my my drum today, and I've already blessed it and asked for good things. Thank you for coming, Creator. Thank you for looking after us. We ask for a good day for everybody today. Hey. Good. Let's carry on with the meeting.
Thank you so much, Elder Florence, Elder Wallace. Thank you so much for getting us started in such a good way. It was wonderful.
Sorry for the scratchy voice.
Oh, it was wonderful. And sorry for not Elder Wallace Alexson. I hope I got it correct.
Alex, right.
Thank you so much. My name is Shauna Sylvester, and it's such a joy to be here today. I hope you're all getting cozy. You have something to drink. I have the pleasure of serving as the chair of the board of the Tamarack Institute. And I'm also the executive director of the Maurice J. Watt Center for Dialogue. I'm zooming in today from the unceded territories of the Wasanic, the Tulalip, and Semanis people on the west coast of British Columbia. Well, actually, I'm just in the Nesclave, just on the other side of the border in the US. So I shout out to others joining us in the United States as well today. I'm wearing red today, and it's a very important, significant day today, and that is in recognition of the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. And I hope as we go forward today, we carry that circle of care that was created through that process, really thinking about what that meant for families and bringing that care throughout today. I want to say a big welcome on behalf of the board, the staff, the volunteers, and the huge community that circles Tamarack. Bonjour tout le monde, je suis très heureux d'être parmi vous. Today and tomorrow, you're going to see a bit of me, and you're also going to see our co-CEO, MC, Brock Carlton, who is going to help steward us through the program. Over to you, Brock.
Well, thanks, Shauna. I am really thrilled to be here as well. This is a really important event, and I also have the pleasure of being vice chair of the Tamarack board, so I work with Shauna and Paul and all the other great folks at Tamarack. I'm currently a partner at the Empathic Leadership Institute, where we work to bring empathic leadership to skills to young leaders through coaching, through training, and through mentoring. I am the former CEO of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. I am coming to you from the unceded territory of the Algonquin peoples, and whenever I'm in my canoe on a lake or hiking on a portage, I'm forever grateful for the great stewardship they showed over the land. Je dirais aussi que je suis bien content d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui pour cet événement très important. So why is this an important event? You know, prior to COVID-19, more than 1.3 million Canadians were lifted out of poverty. So we know how to do this. We know how to end poverty. We know that it's possible. And as we see the light of day at the end of the COVID tunnel, now is the chance to join together across sectors to build back better. So over the next couple of days, we've got inspiring keynotes, recommendations from experts with lived and living experience of poverty, thought-provoking panels, and interactive workshops. Together at this event, we will explore 14 proposed pathways that together can end poverty in Canada. So there's lots to learn. There's lots of interesting stories. There's lots of thought. There's lots of ideas. This is not what I call a pour and snore event. We are not pouring a bunch of information into the atmosphere, and you are not just sitting there passively and snoring your way through the event. There's lots to learn. And what makes this event so successful will be what you learn from each other, what you learn about new strategies, what you learn from your colleagues, and most importantly, what you do differently when you go back to your place of work and to your lives. So we know that things only change for the better if we know what works and we keep doing what works, and we do differently what does not work. So throughout this event, keep asking yourself, what will I do differently? And how can I do it differently to make things better for everyone and end poverty in this country? So thanks again for joining us. It'll be a wonderful couple of days. So back over to you, Shauna.
So I want to get a sense of who's in the room. We are a big group of people, and there are 700 registrants. Plus tomorrow, we are going to be joined by 330 of the Communities Building Youth Futures Network. And if my math is correct, that makes us over 1,000 people. There are more than 300 Communities Reducing Poverty members today, and those represent 80 communities. Among us are 92 people with lived and living experiences of poverty. We also have a large number of bigger groups where more than 10 people have come from a community. End Poverty, Edmonton, hello, Guelph and Wellington Poverty Task Force, Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction, the Regional District of Central Okanagan, the Ottawa Food Bank, Parkdale Food Center, Vibrant Communities, Charlotte City, County, City of Toronto, City of Windsor, United Way, Windsor, Essex, and over 30 people from Calgary's Enough for All and their partners. Plus, we have many collaboratives able to bring groups of 3 to 9 people. Now, in other years, we would have only had 1 or 2 people who could join us, and perhaps that's one of the benefits of us meeting virtually. We're far more representative, our Communities Reducing Poverty networks. Now, with representatives from coast to coast to coast, people joining us from Vancouver, BC, hello, Vancouver, St. John's, Newfoundland, Whitehorse, Northwest Territories, to Windsor and Essex in Ontario. I'd also like to welcome 6 friends from the United States. And from the poll you created upon registering, we've learned that a little over half of the participants are coming from nonprofit organizations, a quarter from government, a quarter with lived and living experiences, and business and other groups. So wherever you are, we'd all like to extend a very warm welcome to you. Invite you to get really cozy, comfortable, and get ready to be a part of an incredible couple of days. I want to encourage you to go to HowSpace, the event page, introduce yourself, share the stories, read the stories that are there, and share your own personal experiences. I'd like to pass it to Brock, who's going to go through our agenda now.
We've got a great day lined up for today. We have 2 plenaries to start the day off. The first is with Mayor Nenshi from Calgary. This is his 3rd time at this event, and he'll always have something fresh to say. He's such an insightful and engaging mayor. Following Mayor Nenshi, there'll be a panel of mayors featuring Carol Saab, CEO of FCM, moderating a discussion with the mayors from Hamilton, Chatham-Kent, and Cornwall. Then there'll be a 30-minute break at 1:30 Eastern Time. In the afternoon, there's 2 rounds of concurrent workshops in the Zoom meeting. You can find these workshops in the May 5th Workshops tab along the top of your HowSpace screen. So when you drop down the menu, click on the workshops you'd like to attend, and you'll find the dial-in information for those workshops. And also, HowSpace is a really interesting place to be. If you like to digest your learning a little differently, you can visit the Take a Break page and explore some of our tips for doing 5-minute mindfulness, energizing home workouts, and visualizing, drawing, or expressing what you're hearing. And finally, give yourself permission to take your own breaks. All these sessions are recorded and will be shared later. So don't hesitate to treat yourself, to care for yourself, to move around. If you're able, each time when we switch sessions or workshops, try going from sitting to standing, or vice versa, or find a different room to join from. But most of all, enjoy and learn the best way that you can.
Now, whenever the Tamarack community comes together, we try and hold space for all voices in learning journeys and experiences. And to ensure that this space is safe and welcoming, we've created some shared principles for respectful participation, and they're outlined on the HowSpace. But as a gentle reminder, we ask that you're listening, and as you're doing that, you're holding back your judgment. People will be sharing stories, and it's important that we respect the privacy of others. Of course, there's 0 tolerance for racist or discriminatory comments. And we all know it's easy to veer off tangents and introduce new topics, but we ask you to please try and stay focused on the topics at hand. We're creating a space for dialogue. And by that, we ask you to build on other people's ideas and perhaps stay to one conversation at a time, speak for yourself. And of course, please ensure that you're muted if you're not speaking. Now, we're thrilled that Asma Basalama will be our graphic recorder today through the plenary sessions. Asma is an artist, a graphic recorder with experience working for NGOs and community development projects. She's been working as a graphic recorder for 5 years while pursuing a career in law with dreams of combining visual facilitation and helping our community with legal issues. So in between speakers, we'll point you to HowSpace and where you can find her work as it evolves. Now let's get started. It gives me great pleasure to introduce someone who probably does not need an introduction to this group. And I'm, of course, speaking of Paul Bourne, the co-founder, the co-CEO of the Tamarack Institute, the founder and director of Vibrant Communities, and a member of the Order of Canada. Now, as many of you know, the board of directors of Tamarack has announced that Paul will soon be retiring from his co-CEO role. But I can guarantee you that Paul isn't going anywhere. He will always remain a part of Tamarack, teaching, coaching, and writing, and this community will always be a part of him. So as our current CEO and devoted member of the community's Reducing Poverty team, please join me in welcoming Paul Bourne as he phrases the summit conversation. Over to you, Paul.
Hey, thank you so much, Shauna and Brock, for that warm welcome. And Elder Wallace and Florence, thanks for grounding us. It was just a beautiful opening. So on behalf of my co-CEO, Liz Weaver, and the Tamarack board, I want to just start by thanking our team of staff and volunteers for such an amazing job inviting you to our city's Reducing Poverty and Communities Building Youth Futures gatherings. We've been preparing for many months. Together, as Shauna said, we are nearly 1,000 strong, representing people with lived and living experience of poverty, business leaders, government at all levels, and community organizations. We're deeply grateful for the work you all do in communities across Canada and beyond. We are because of you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for joining this conversation. I know this is a time when COVID is rising again, and many are suffering. This is a time of increased uncertainty and more unemployment, and many are sick and have gotten poorer. It is a challenging moment in our history. And yes, we are all responding, and particularly this network of people. When we envisioned this gathering nearly 2 years ago, Canada was reducing poverty at an unprecedented rate. We had entered a new, optimistic time for poverty reduction. Canada was focused with a robust federal strategy, most provinces and territories implementing strategies, and as many as 350 cities were launching poverty reduction plans. We had not foreseen the pandemic. Now, our communities have been supporting the needs of people living in poverty in our communities, especially through this pandemic. There has been so much innovation and goodwill. We know much more needs to be done, and we are responding. The pandemic has brought forth many ideas about poverty and inequity. There have been calls for basic income, for accelerated housing initiatives, for more equitable access to medical services, for better pay and sick days for essential workers. This response has fueled our optimism. Some would say we don't have the right to share optimism at a time like this. But I know we'll get through this. And I know we will be strong. And so I want to share my optimism today in the belief that we are resilient and a hopeful people, and that good will flourish again soon. We are here for the next several days to talk about the end of poverty. I want to share with you about why I believe this is an important conversation. As Brock mentioned earlier, in January of 2020, the Government of Canada released a report sharing that poverty in Canada had been reduced to our lowest level in history. Just think about that for a moment. Now, I know that we are accustomed to receiving such news with skepticism, but I ask you for the next several days to engage in the facts. Between 2015 and 2019, more than 1.3 million Canadians moved out of poverty, and of those, more than 400,000 were children. This meant that pre-COVID, 90% of Canadians were not living in poverty. The most notable reductions were seen in St. John, where they went from 19 to 14%, Toronto from 19 to 13%, and Winnipeg from 15 to 11%. When St. John joined the Cities Reducing Poverty Network in 2002, they had nearly 28% of their population living in poverty, one of the highest poverty rates in the country. Their explicit goal was to cut that rate in half. And after nearly 20 tireless years, they have achieved their goal. Thank you to Bill Gale and the entire team in St. John. Well done. Soon, I think COVID will be behind us. I'm an optimist. I have spent over 30 years, much of my adult life, working to fight poverty, and I have never seen so many levels of government and so many communities learning and working together. As we gather today, let us not forget this unprecedented accomplishment Canada has achieved. Today, as a network, we officially launch a year of learning and innovation about the end of poverty, something we've committed ourselves to. And with that, as many of you know, today we want to declare a new name for our network. After much discussion, and through all the future search planning we did together as a network last year, we are officially announcing our name change as a network from Cities Reducing Poverty to Communities Ending Poverty. This name change is timely, as many smaller communities are joining cities in our growing network, and we wanted to include them in the name. And by changing the word reducing to the word ending, it will act as a constant reminder of the achievements we have accomplished to date and those to come. In addition to hearing Mayor Nenshi and Melody Barnes, two of the biggest supporters of our networks to date, and amazing panels of mayors and youth, we will be exploring 14 pathways that have significantly contributed to the work and thought of ending poverty. We chose these 14 pathways because they are real actionable ideas, and together could lead us to the end of poverty. Consider how affordable childcare reduced poverty in Quebec. We are expecting similar results when the federal government implements their affordable childcare plan. We have a workshop to tell this story. Consider the effects of increased minimum wage led by Alberta and Ontario and now growing across the country. If you are single and work full-time all year, A $15 minimum wage will move you out of poverty. We have a workshop that will show you that we have made so many gains in fighting working poverty, but we need to go beyond minimum wage. 42% of those living in poverty work. Our speakers will share a set of recommendations that could very well end working poverty. Consider how effective and quickly the federal, provincial, and territorial governments have responded to the COVID crisis. Consider the effect of the poverty reduction strategies governments have implemented to date. We have a workshop that tracks the policies of each level of government and why they're so vital in the fight to end poverty. There are some very specific ideas we're all excited about that have huge potential to end poverty. A basic income, a national supplement for ending disability poverty, Built for Zero, a model for ending chronic homelessness, ending youth poverty and building youth futures, ending Indigenous poverty in cities, ending poverty in rural communities, a human rights approach to ending poverty, and solutions to climate change and ending poverty. We have workshops for each of these ideas. And of course, we want to celebrate the work of communities ending poverty. And yes, we have a workshop for that too. 20 years ago, when this network began, there were no communities with comprehensive, action-focused plans to end poverty. The federal government and our provinces and territories did not have a plan. Today, they all have a plan. Communities Ending Poverty also has a plan. We are a network made up of more than 350 municipalities represented by 81 regional networks. We are effectively the largest network of our kind in the world. Our plans have not just gathered dust on a shelf. Our plans have fueled ideas to fight the effects of COVID on the most vulnerable. Our plans have helped reduce poverty to the lowest level in our history. More than 1.3 million Canadians benefited from these plans. Today, we gather to start planning the end of poverty. Today, we begin a new chapter. Today, we launch Communities Ending Poverty. I am so glad you have joined us for this conversation. Thank you very much. And now, over to Mayor Naheed Nenshi, one of our biggest supporters.
Paul, before we go to Mayor Nenshi, you don't know this, but I get to ask you a question.
Okay, thanks, Shauna.
Yes, this is a bit of a surprise for Paul, but Paul is retiring, coming on. And so what we want to do is ask Paul a question and take this moment to give you an opportunity, Paul. You just laid out for us this huge transition to ending poverty. We want to ask you, as you've gone through these years, you've helped to create, you've birthed Tamarack, you've nurtured it. What are you most proud of in the last 20 years of your time with Tamarack?
Oh, wow. That's a big one. I mean, I'm going to start with Cities Reducing Poverty, which is now, of course, Communities Ending Poverty. And I don't know, like, I don't look at it as being proud of something. I'm kind of proud of people. And I'm so thankful. I'm thankful to the two of you and our entire board. We have the most amazing board that you could ever wish for. You know, I think of people like Mark Kabaj and Liz Weaver who have been there from the beginning. I think of, you know, people like Bill Gale and Tom Cooper and just a whole list of people, Sheila Regier, and the list goes on. And many of them are here today who have spent a better part of their lives right beside me. So it's like, to get to the lowest level of poverty in Canada, it's not about attribution. right? It's not about who did it. That's not important. It's a matter of contribution, right? So many of us have spent our entire lives at this process. And I know COVID came and it nipped it in the bud for a little while, but we're going to get through this. And, I kind of thought we were going to end poverty by the time it was by 2030. And I think we were well on the way if we kept implementing at the pace that we were. It might take a little longer, but I sure hope I'm here when we get there. It would be such a gift to the world, for Canada to end poverty as kind of a memory of coming out of COVID. I think that's probably it. So many wonderful people. That's what I'm proud of, and just been so honored to have been able to work side by side with them all.
Well, those are wonderful thoughts, Paul. I just think of your wisdom and your commitment and your optimism through this journey that we've all been on for many, many years. This is my third time emceeing this event or an event like this, and I think of the evolution from a few hundred people in a room to over 1,000 people in a Zoom call now. This is a tremendous evolution, and I think back to times, for example, previous speeches by Mayor Nenshi, which were awesome, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I remember, I have a particular memory of the presentation by Cindy Blackstock, which just stood everybody on their ear as we came to understand the depth of the trauma and the tragedy of the residential schools. It was a stunning moment for me and personally, and I think for everybody in the room. And there were many other moments like this. I remember early on in the days that we were working together, I was talking to one mayor, because I'd talked to lots of mayors over the years. And I was talking to one mayor, and he was absolutely adamant that mayors don't fight poverty. Mayors don't do poverty. And that has changed so much, that perspective and the realities have changed so much. Just wondering if you got any thoughts on the evolution of the municipal presence in the poverty progress.
Well, yeah, I mean, as you're talking about mayors getting involved, Mayor Eisenberger is going to be here from Hamilton. And I remember a few years ago we met and they had sold a public utility and they announced that they were going to put $50 million. Can you imagine? $50 million into fighting poverty. They were going to put the money from the public utility. I mean, municipalities never thought like that before. He's a real visionary. I think of Mayor Nenshi and the development of the work that they had done. I remember Walter Hossley and the team, and there was a lot of them working together to create this amazing process in Calgary. I think of the mayor of Edmonton, Don Iveson and team, and how they've put together this incredible strategy there. I can't help but think of St. John as my favorite. And I'm not, please nobody, don't be offended. But, here they were 20 years ago. And Bill Gale, he was a board retirement Royal Bank executive who was out for a walk and found a homeless person and talked to him, went and bought him coffee. And then he was so moved by his story that he started calling all of his friends, including J.K. Irving of Irving Oil. And they started working together and they created the Business Community Anti-Poverty Initiative. And out of that, Vibrant St. John. And I was sitting around with them in St. John, helping them develop their plan. And I just remember that moment when we said, well, what's the vision? What's the dream? And one of the members there said, well, what's poverty everywhere else? I just know it's so friggin' high here. And I said, well, it's, maybe 14%. He says, what's it here again? I said, about 28. He said, I just want to be normal. I just want us to be normal. I want us to be like everybody else. And as I said in my talk, here we are 20 years later, right? And they did it. You know, I remember Hamilton having been one of the highest rates of child poverty. And Liz Weaver, our co-CEO, who we're just all so proud of, she came from that network. She led that network with the team. They started Hamilton, the best place to raise a child, right? And it wasn't long, and they went from the highest rate of child poverty in Canada to in the lowest 10%, right? So I think when we're talking about proud, it has to do with the fact that our movement has not just been about talk, and that we have truly achieved population level outcomes, right? There are many less poor people, but that translates into cities that have significantly reduced the number of people living in poverty in them. And that's the big challenge right now, Shauna and Brock, is for us to figure this last piece out, right? So the last 10%, which is where we're at right now, we are, the last 10% is critical, but we work very differently than we have in the past. And that's the conversation today. And I'm so thrilled that Mayor Nenshi is going to be here to take us into that work and into that thinking. So over to you.
Well, thanks for those comments, and thanks for all you've done, Paul. I certainly have benefited personally from my relationship with you. So now it is time to turn it over. Okay. So we've just been talking about mayors. We've been talking about the fact that Mayor Nenshi in particular has been a strong supporter of the work of Tamarack, and this is his third time speaking at Tamarack. Mayor Nenshi became mayor in 2010 and joined the FCN Mayor's Table, which is where I got to know him. And so on his arrival at the Big City Mayor's Table, I noticed a new, wise, and thoughtful voice for his city and its citizens, a voice for cities and citizens in the pan-Canadian context. And so Mayor Nenshi never wavered from the focus on people, community, his city, and his country. He's been re-elected in 2013 and 2017, and his leadership and caring for his people was most on full display during the devastating floods in Calgary of 2013. And we saw him in action at that time, and we're most impressed, Mayor Nenshi, welcome, by his leadership, particularly during that traumatic experience the Calgary citizens were experiencing. But I also witnessed the playful side, Mayor Nenshi. I was at the table in 2014 when Mayor Nenshi was acknowledged as the best mayor in the world by the UK institution. And his Big City Mayor's colleagues presented him with a plastic gold tiara and asked Mayor Nenshi to wear this tiara during the meeting as a recognition of his supremacy in the mayoral world. Do you remember that, Mayor Nenshi? Yeah. Though I don't think we saw Mayor Nenshi wearing that tiara when we were meeting with the Prime Minister in those days.
I'm pretty sure I kept it on, Brock.
Anyway, Mayor Nenshi, welcome. It's really nice to see you again. And okay, so Mayor Nenshi, how are things in Calgary today?
Well, bad. The pandemic is hitting this place badly, but I'm so happy to be with 700 people interested in dealing with poverty issues. And hey, Brock, so nice to see you. Is there life after retirement? That's a very relevant question for me right now.
There is life after retirement, but it's not as busy, which is kind of you get to slow down a little bit. You have a grandchild or two, and away you go.
That's kind of biologically impossible for me, the last bit, but hopefully slowing down is a little less biologically impossible.
Well, I actually am at a point now where I don't know if I could speed up again. The slowing down has been so nice and gentle, but still engaged and keeping busy to some degree. Yeah.
Terrific. All right. They're telling us, Brock, in the back, that we just need to keep talking, which is super hard for you and me to continue that conversation. But I'm interested. I'm really happy to see that you are continuing your work with Tamarack and with anti-poverty stuff. And I'm just wondering how you've been doing through the course of the pandemic in this context of anti-poverty. I'm going to be talking a lot about things we've learned in the last year.
Well, I think we've all learned how it's affected people so differently. I mean, personally, I'm quite settled and secure and gentle, and having a gentle life. But I see around me the people who are really struggling, the youth with their challenges of emotional stability and calm, and I have a son who's living on his own, and he's finding it really hard to be so alone all the time. And working with Tamarack, we're seeing the disparities as they're showing up. The COVID just shines a spotlight on those disparities in ways that are more dramatic than even the most dramatic COVID experiences. So it's a really interesting moment. It's a really interesting moment to see what the real fault lines are in our society. And that tells us how to build back better in ways that respect those fault lines and help to fix them and go forward. So I think,
and I hope that's something that becomes permanent, because there's been a lot of terrible things during the pandemic, but there's also been a lot of learnings. And I keep saying that I hope that we never forget the bad things about COVID, but that we also never forget what we learned.
Yeah, that's so true. So why don't we hand it over to you, Mayor Nenshi, and you can take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Brock. Thank you, Shauna. And thank you all. I understand there's 700 of us here talking about poverty. And to me, this is an extraordinary thing, because it really highlights the need for all of us to, if you use the cliche, build back better. And I know you had an extraordinary land acknowledgement already this morning, but I am coming to you from my fully equipped home studio, 10 out of 10 on Room Raider, which is also known as my dining room, because no one's coming for dinner. Here in Northeast Calgary, a particular part of the country that has been hit very hard by the pandemic, but a place where we always acknowledge that we are lucky enough to live on an ancient land, a land where people have been living for many thousands of years. And I acknowledge today the people of the Treaty 7 nations of Southern Alberta, the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, and of course, all the Indigenous and non-Indigenous people who make their homes here. Because ultimately, here, like everywhere in Canada, is a place where people have been coming for thousands of years. In Calgary, they were drawn by the water to a place that the Blackfoot, the Elbow, the place where two rivers come together. It's a semi-arid region. And so it was the water that really brought people here. And they've been coming here to hunt and fish and trade, to dream, to dance, to live, to love, to fight sometimes. Sounds sort of like my dealings with the Premier of Alberta, except for the live, love, dream, and dance parts. But ultimately, to engage in that very human act of building community. And for the last 150 years or so on this land, we have tried. We haven't always succeeded, but we have tried to be a beacon of light and hope for people from every corner of this broken world. To say to those people, you're welcome here. You'll be safe here. You and your children and their children and their children can live an extraordinary life here. A life of dignity, a life of potential, a life of possibility. And ultimately, all we do, and all of you do every day, is that simple. It's to help build that dream, to ensure that we fulfill that promise that we make to everyone here, whether your family has been here for thousands of generations, or whether you arrived last week from a refugee camp. How do we continue to build that experiment, that Canada, that place where everyone has the opportunity to live an extraordinary Canadian life? And that's really what I want to talk to a little bit today through the context of the work we're doing in anti-poverty. Now, I should tell you the very next thing it says in my notes here, and I'm notorious for not actually reading my notes, but my notes actually say something nice about Paul Bourne. Well, that's easy to do. You know, Paul, I think the moment that I announced that I wouldn't be running for re-election, you decided, all right, now it's safe to retire because who else am I going to get to come speak at these conferences? But in reality, Paul, no one on this conference needs to know what an extraordinary leader you are in the work of anti-poverty and in the work of community building since founding Tamarack 20 years ago and long before that as well. You know, I'm influenced by the fact that you in seminary learned about that Hebrew word ger that means stranger or refugee, and how we have all been that, and it is our job to look after everyone who is. And I think that is a great mantra by which to live life. And I know that's a mantra that you live life forever. So Brock was just telling me that there is life after retirement and there is service after retirement. And I know that we will all find that service. But I just really want to say thank you to you, Paul, for your extraordinary leadership, for bringing the issues of dignity and possibility for every human being who's lucky enough to share this land into the hearts and minds of Canadians. You'll be greatly missed, but your legacy is indescribable. Well, one of Paul's legacies, though, is that he keeps asking me to come speak to Tamarack conferences. So I think this is my third or fourth time speaking as a keynote at one of these conferences. And I've run out of things to say. So you're just going to get a rehash of my greatest hits. I hope that's all right. Now, in reality, this year, things have changed a lot. And while this will be my last time speaking with you as mayor of Calgary, I really do want to reflect on where we've been and concretely where we can go together. So let's start with thinking about what we've learned in the pandemic. Clearly, well, I should actually back up a little bit, which is that on this land in this country, over the course of the last 14 or 15 months, we have actually faced 5 simultaneous crises. There's a public health crisis. There is a mental health and addictions crisis that was always here, but has been exacerbated by the pandemic. There is an economic crisis, particularly one that highlights the inequities in our society, and for one of the first times, an economic crisis that affects women even more than men in terms of work. We're facing an environmental crisis as we grapple with the very real threat of climate change. And finally, this year we've had a real reckoning that has been hard for a lot of us, particularly those of us who try to work in the social sector, try to work in social justice. And that is a real reckoning on the issue of racism. A real understanding that we have to somehow reconcile the fact that we are proud of the diverse and inclusive place that we have created here together, but also that we have a lot of work to do, that we have to go from being a place that is multicultural, that is inclusive, that is diverse, to a place that is truly anti-racist. It's not enough just not to be racist. We have to move to anti-racism. And few of us, certainly not me, know what that journey really looks like and know what the destination truly is. But we know we have to get there. And when we think in that context, when we think about all of that has happened during the pandemic, it is very true that we have cast a light on cracks in our society. Let me start with one. Here in my neighborhood in Northeast Calgary, things barely changed in the spring when people were being told to work from home, because my neighbors didn't have the option of working from home. They are working on the front lines in healthcare. They're driving taxis, they're driving buses, they're working in the food supply chain, they are retail store clerks. And they are people that many of us, even me who lives in the neighborhood, don't always think about. So think about this. Every morning in your city or your town, there are women who wake up very early in the morning and they take the bus to work at a long-term care facility where they wake up our grandparents, change them, bathe them, get them ready for breakfast. And they work hard in that job until the lunch rush. Then they're done for the day, but they're not, because their employer will only give them enough hours a week to prevent paying them benefits. So they get on another bus and they get across town and go to their second job at another long-term care center where they repeat the same thing for dinner until they get our grandparents to bed, and then they go home to their own families. We have allowed, and by the way, they still don't get benefits. They're working 60 or 65 hours, 2 part-time jobs, still don't get benefits. And we've allowed that to happen. Now, I am embarrassed to tell you that I have never had a job, well, not since I was a teenager, that didn't have sickness benefits. I did not know that there were jobs that didn't have paid sick leave. I had no idea that what the rules were around whether or not you can be fired if you have to call in sick. I just didn't know. And I'm the mayor, and I work on anti-poverty work. And so you think about the fact that that woman, my neighbor, she's a woman, she's racialized, she might be very educated, but this is her choice, her only choice in what she can do. And we've allowed that to happen. We've created a society where we are willfully blind to the real lived lives of so many of our neighbors. And that has really played through in this pandemic in so many ways. I hope that our eyes have been opened. I hope that we can recommit ourselves to creating a more just system for all of us. We have to understand this has been hard on a lot of people. So yesterday here in Alberta, we announced a number of new restrictions. Alberta's rates of infection of COVID are nearly triple those reported rates in India. By the way, we know that India is unfortunately massively underreporting its numbers because the testing system is overwhelmed, but that's a pretty stark thing. And don't feel smug if you're not in Alberta, because across Canada, our Canadian average is higher than India. And so yesterday we announced a series of new restrictions, the Premier did. And I'm in support of them. I'm very much in support of them. I think they were very late. But at the same time, we have to recognize what impact that has on people. When we're closing restaurants, what impact does that have on people whose livelihood is to work in those restaurants? It's easy for me to say, I just sit here in my dining room and keep working. But we have to have a real understanding of every other impact of this pandemic. And we know certainly that women have been more impacted than men in this particular recession. We know that Black, Indigenous, and people of color Canadians have also been deeply impacted because the sectors that have been hit hard, like retail, hospitality, and childcare, are sectors where women and minorities tend to work in greater numbers. And so these are things that we have to really think hard about. We have to think about how our gig economy, which has in one way offered great flexibility and opportunity to many workers, is also an unbelievably precarious way of living, and how that has been impacted by the work that we do. Certainly, COVID has widened the gap between the rich and the poor. And for a guy like me, I'm not spending money on gas or dry cleaning. I'm not eating out. I'm probably better off financially than I was at the beginning of the pandemic. But that is not the case for so very many others in our society. And in our typical polite Canadian way, we've talked about how we're all in the same boat. We're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm, but we're certainly not all in the same boat. I was shocked when I saw on Facebook, a Facebook friend of mine from I'll just say it, a whiter part of town, saying that she has not met anyone who's had COVID. And I thought, how is that even possible? Greater than 1 in 50 Albertans has been diagnosed positive. And if you were to walk down my street here in Northeast Calgary, a community of immigrants and working class people, and you rang every doorbell, I would be shocked if you got to a house where someone didn't say they personally knew someone who's died of COVID. I'm probably up to a dozen. And if there's only one good thing about the variants, there's nothing good about the variants. It's that it is so much more transmissible that now all of Calgary, not just Northeast Calgary, is well above India. And so people are starting to hear this and they're starting to feel it in their own lives. But for a long time, COVID was something that was happening to somebody else, somewhere else. And in our typical Canadian politeness, we were not acknowledging that. We were not acknowledging that racialized communities were much harder hit than others. Because here's the thing. I don't think I know anybody white who died of COVID. And these are the conversations that we're too shy or too Canadian or too polite to have. But they're conversations that we have to have. And I hope that what COVID has done is it's shown us what we already know around people living in poverty being at higher risk for poor health determinants, and people living in poverty not able to live the life of opportunity and dignity that I always talk about. So the first time that we had a conversation about this, I repeated to all of you what I said to my colleagues in Calgary when we launched Enough for All, our poverty reduction strategy. And what I said was, there are so many people, uncountable people, who are doing extraordinary work on anti-poverty every single day. They're helping individuals, they're helping families escape from poverty. But the needle hasn't moved. Our rates of poverty in the country hasn't really changed. And I remember saying at that time, 11 years ago, child poverty in particular remains extremely high. Now, that's not quite true anymore. Here in Alberta, we've done something extraordinary, which was we have halved the rate of child poverty. People who've been working in poverty for so long, we need to take a moment and celebrate that. Now, that is largely due to government policy, the introduction of the Canada Child Benefit and the Alberta Child Benefit. Now, in July 2020, the Alberta Child Benefit was replaced. So it's not clear if we're going to see those numbers start to drag up once again. Now, that happened a lot because of government policy, but it wouldn't have happened without extraordinary activists pushing the needle on government policy. That said, although we can celebrate a little bit, maybe we can have a little piece of cake, we have to recognize that the overall rates of poverty remain stubbornly high. And we have a lot of work to do at every level, from government policy to effective programming to people working together to make this change. And I'll remind you of the first line of our anti-poverty strategy in Calgary, Enough for All. And the first line is, my neighbor's strength is my strength. It's a simple statement, but it's a profound one. Because it means that if my neighbor's strength is my strength, if my neighbor's success is my success, then my neighbor's failure must also be my failure. So we all have work to do together. And the title of our anti-poverty strategy, Enough for All, has a number of different meanings. It says that in a prosperous society like this one, there ought to be enough for everyone to have a decent life. It says that what we spend in the poverty sector ought to be enough for better impacts and better outcomes. But it is also an aspirational statement. saying that we live in a society where there ought to be enough for all. Now, I don't want to spend a bunch of time today talking about policy prescriptions and so on, universal basic income, things we need to do, because you're at a conference full of experts who can actually talk about this stuff much more thoughtfully than a politician can. But I do want to talk about a couple of really important initiatives that we've got to be working on now. I want to talk about housing, and I want to talk about mental health. So first of all, let's talk about housing. You must socially distance. It's important to isolate. If you are sick with COVID, then isolate within your own home, which means you should have your own bedroom and your own bathroom. These are the public health statements that we hear every day. And they are public health statements that are full of privilege. How do you physically distance if you live in a multi-generational home or a rooming house? What if you live in a place where having your own bedroom and your bathroom in your own bathroom is a completely unattainable dream? What we realized is that during COVID is that the housing crisis that we have allowed to happen in our communities is not just unsafe for the people that are stuck in it, but it's actually unsafe for everybody else too. And maybe at that moment, we turned on a light and we said, housing and investments in housing are investments in community, and they're investments for everybody. So almost from the beginning of COVID, and I won't take credit for this, I was on a phone call with the Prime Minister's office early in the pandemic, and out of nowhere, my chief of staff, who is brilliant, but also she's kind of just gets stuff done, right? She doesn't spend a lot of time talking about stuff. She just gets it done. So we're a good match. But out of the blue, I'd never heard her talk like this before. She said to a senior representative in the Prime Minister's office, COVID is our opportunity to end homelessness forever. And if you're talking about building back better, that is the one and only thing we're going to ask you to do, is focus in on housing. And this led to many, many conversations and a great deal of action. And the argument that I was making is that there are cities in Canada, Calgary foremost amongst them, but others as well, where the unique combination of the economic situation during the pandemic and the scale of the homelessness crisis and the housing crisis means that with a relatively modest investment, we could actually fulfill the promise we made 15 years ago to end homelessness in 10 years. Let me explain. So here in Calgary, we have quite high vacancy rates, commercial and residential, which is not something we're used to, but has kind of stuck in with the economic downturn over the last 5 or 7 years. We also have a number of hotels, because we've overbuilt our hotel sector, some would argue, that have been unable to continue. So the pitch I made to the federal government and also to the Big City Mayors Caucus of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities was, let's take this opportunity, and for a relatively modest investment in this window of opportunity, we could actually more than treble, perhaps we could increase by an order of magnitude, the number of new affordable housing units we build in a year. Because it's always been super frustrating to me that I go to ribbon cuttings and we're so proud of opening this new complex with 100 units in it or 105 units in it, when in Calgary, we're short at least 5,000 units of affordable housing. We're never going to get there 100 units at a time. And so all of that advocacy actually led to something called the Rapid Housing Initiative. And the idea from the federal government that they would quickly help us purchase existing complexes and convert them, build modular housing and convert that. These are the sorts of things that were really important for us to be able to move quickly to be able to move rapidly into this work to significantly end homelessness. So I applaud the federal government for doing that. Now, I will tell you that, as always with federal projects, the details were the problem. The implementation was the problem. So here in Calgary, we have about 8% of Canada's homeless population, and we got about 2% of the funding. So clearly there remains work to be done. The federal government was having some trouble with what I call asymmetrical investment in places where your money will go further. But ultimately, we still have an opportunity. And the next mayor of Calgary could, with the right work right now, be able to announce within 2 years, that we were able to end homelessness in Calgary. And as you all know, the work we do on housing and on homelessness is critical work, because it's having that stability of a home that makes a big difference for people who are living in poverty. I want to jump to mental health. Let me start by saying 1 out of 4 of us will suffer from mental illness at some point in our lives. 4 out of 4 of us will struggle with our mental health at some point in our lives. And that means that working on issues of mental health, or working on issues of humanity, working on issues of every single one of us. But we never talk about it. We never try to help with it. And so let me tell you that here in Calgary, like everywhere in Canada, the issues of addiction are serious. We lose almost 1 person a day to the crisis of overdose. That's way more than the amount of people we lose to violent crime and car accidents every single year. And for a while, we lost way more people to addiction and overdose than we lost to COVID. Unfortunately, those numbers are starting to come together. And so what we did this year is we launched Canada's first community action plan on mental health and addiction. It was a cross-sector collaboration. You can read about it in the Stanford Social Innovation Review. It was really about bringing people together the way we did on our anti-poverty work in order to connect and in order to move forward. You can find our work, and we'll get someone to put it in the chat for the Zoom meeting today. And I really encourage all of you to take some time with it, to read it, to understand how we've done things like create a wellness desk at the Calgary Public Library where people can get mental health support, where we have worked to create a simple website, Community Connects YYC, where people can find the referrals they need at their own. But ultimately, what I want to do is I want to thank every one of you for the work you do, because it matters. And I want to finish up with a story. And it's not a story of my own. It's a story that was told to me by someone who's here with us today, Colleen Houston from the Disability Action Hall, who does extraordinary work every day with people with disabilities. I want to tell you the story. A woman arrives at City Hall. She goes to buy her subsidized bus pass. And we've had a low-income transit pass for many years, which is half the price of a regular pass. This woman has a family of 5. They can only afford one bus pass a month. She arrives at the counter and she takes $45 out of her purse to buy her bus pass. What she didn't know is that just the week before, City Council had made a decision to have Canada's very first sliding scale income test for bus passes. And she was in the lowest income bracket. So the cashier said, "That'll be $5, please." She didn't know what to do. So she looked at her $45 on the counter. She put $20 back in her purse. And she said, "I'll take 5, please." And for the first time, think of the difference that made to that family. Every member of the family could participate in the community. They could go to work. They could go to school. We have an honor system on our train, so they could ride the train without constantly looking over their shoulder to see if they would get a ticket inspector and a fine that they would never be able to pay. And it was a really small investment for the city. It was a fraction of what we spent on potholes that year. And ultimately, that's what makes the difference. And that only happens because of the extraordinary work of Tamarack and the extraordinary work of every one of you. Let's keep ending poverty.
Thank you so much, Mayor Nenshi. And thank you for that story. My neighbor's strength is my strength. I'm not going to forget that. That is incredible. And thank you also for acknowledging the impact that this storm that is raging around us is having on women, on racialized people, but that you've shone the spotlight so carefully on those that are fighting poverty and are doing it on the front lines. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for all of the work that the Calgary community is doing to end poverty.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to get everybody stretching a little bit. Maybe, you've been in your seat for a bit. Feel free to stand up, move your head a little bit, move your shoulders. It's a little hard to do this in a jacket, but I'm doing it. Just take that moment to stretch, grab something to drink if you need it. Oh, yeah, that's got it. Oh, we spend too much of our time in these chairs. But hopefully you're feeling inspired. Great words so far this morning. Now that we're feeling just a little bit more awake, I want to introduce the following video clip, and it's edited by Tamer Solomon, which features experts with lived and living experience from the city's reducing poverty community across the country, now to be called Communities Ending Poverty. Now, here they share their recommendations for the most important things we need to do to end poverty in Canada. I want to remind those of you who have lived or living experience of poverty and are moved through this video, if you want to share your recommendations or stories, please go to the Elevating Voices section of the pre-event page of HowSpace. Now over to the video.
Having those with living experiences sitting on boards, discussing their experiences, it brings a truthfulness and honesty to decision-making tables. When people share with an open heart and an open mind, many things can happen. Many changes can be made. Poverty and homelessness can happen to anyone at any time. So this is the time that we need to stand together, sit at these tables, make changes, so then nobody else has to go and have these stories.
Canada should end poverty because it is the right thing to do for its citizens, for its new citizens, for its future citizens.
This is an extremely wealthy country. There's no reason for anyone to be homeless or to live in poverty.
Ending poverty makes an equal plane for everybody. We don't have to be competing. We wouldn't have to be, there wouldn't be power and control. It would be everybody as human beings the way we're supposed to be.
The reason why we need to end it so much is that it's starting to tear apart the nuclear families, starting to affect people in so many ways that you can't help but know somebody that's suffering at one point that's living in poverty.
Because hunger creates stress. And with stress, we become incapacitated and are no longer able to learn and function.
We shouldn't have children going hungry. We shouldn't be having children with a lack of access to education.
It would cost the government less money to lift people out of poverty than to continue forking out all this money for sectors that they can't no longer afford.
Because many of the issues that we think about on a daily basis, things like healthcare, crime, race, relationships, education, are all directly impacted by poverty. So it's like a domino effect. When we knock down one, which is poverty, then we automatically can be one step closer to tackling the others. That is why we simply cannot afford to ignore the bounding issue. I believe that in order for any effort of ending poverty to be successful, we first have to see the urgency of the issue. We have to see it or treat it as an emergency crisis.
The most important recommendation, I believe, is to have lived experiences on boards. Recognize that they're the experts and and empower them to lift their voices to make changes.
You have to look at the little people, and you have to learn how to build people from the bottom up. They need to be built up spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically.
We need to have a universal basic income in Canada. It needs to be set at regional levels. What it costs to live in Toronto versus Williams Lake, BC, or up north is different.
Puts it in, or when the federal government has the courage to do this, they should make it so that no government coming in after them can cut it out.
The government isn't in favor of that. They could implement programs that rapidly bring people out of poverty. You can do that with free post-secondary education, lowering prices on housing, because housing is ridiculous.
We need to continue to support people with mental health issues, people with disabilities, by providing income supports that are growing with the economy. So we need to make sure that we're providing them an accurate living allowance so that they are not forced to live in poverty.
If we just spend the money in a smarter way, then poverty can go away within the next 10 years.
The thing I love about Tamarack is they focus on community, bringing community together, no matter what social economic background you have. And we often forget that poverty isn't just about money, it's about connections with other people. We need to focus on that, and especially in a time of a pandemic and after a pandemic, is what skills can we all bring together and share and be a part of society with dignity and respect.
We should end poverty if we seek to preserve the dreams of not only this generation, but the ones to follow, because the children of tomorrow are the ones that will guide us into a better future. So what are we teaching our children of today if we do absolutely nothing about poverty? If we say that we truly believe in the dignity of life for humans of this country and humans everywhere, then any poverty should be first on our minds. We are stronger together, and when we actively do something to be part of the solution to ending poverty, we all win.
Hello. I hope that the video provided you with some great insights. Now, I want to suggest that if you have a moment, go to HouseSpace and download the 10 guides for engaging people with lived and living experience. This was informed by an advisory committee of experts who have lived in living experience and written to support poverty reduction groups. It includes 10 good ideas for engaging people with lived and living experience, 10 stories that inspire, 10 useful resources, and 10 ways to get started. Now over to you, Brock, for our next panel.
Great, thanks a lot, Shauna. This next panel is a great panel of mayors, chaired by and moderated by Carol Saab, the CEO of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. For me, this is like old home week. Having spent time with Nenshi a few minutes ago, and now seeing Carol. Carol and I worked together for about 10 years before she replaced me as CEO. She is a tireless champion for cities and communities, and has been a driving force behind the watershed achievements for municipalities, securing unprecedented investments and progress for cities and communities. And when I say that last comment, I think, Carol, back to early days of 2019, when you came into my office and you're in the middle of the normal pre-budget discussions. You said, there's something going on. They're wanting us to come back with some ideas, and we're told to think big. Like, how big can we think? I remember you and I batted numbers back and forth, and the energy in the room got more intense and your eyes got bigger, and we came up with a number. And then the federal budget ended up with $1 billion invested through FCM for sustainable infrastructure and projects like the Low Carbon Cities Canada, this LC3. Great moment, Carol. You've been a driving force for years, and it's really wonderful to see you in the chair as CEO of FCM. So I'm just going to, as I said last June, I'll say it again. Over to you, Carol.
Thanks very much, Brock, for that kind introduction. This is our first actual event post-transition together, so it's a real treat to be joining you here today. And Shauna, and thank you everybody for joining. I know I saw the wonderful land acknowledgement that happened this morning, but I too will acknowledge that I'm joining you today from my home in Ottawa, which is on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. And it feels important to acknowledge on National Red Dress Day, the National Day of Awareness of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirited People, that we take a moment to really just reflect on the tragedy of the disproportionate impact of violence and commit to either reading or rereading the report of the National Inquiry and to action. Truly, none of us are safe until our Indigenous sisters are. I'd also be remiss if I didn't add my congratulations and immense gratitude to Paul on your upcoming retirement. What an important impact and legacy you have had and you leave. Thank you very, very much. And so we'll get right into it. This is a really vital, important conversation we'll be having here today. You know, one of my favorite positions on a speaking roster is to be after Mayor Nenshi, after he's been able to really articulate, as truly only he can, both the opportunity and imperative to end poverty. And it's even better when my role is to help engage then a panel of mayors dedicated and equally impressive in their own right. Because poverty is a tragedy of lived experience and a crushing weight on the potential of our communities, it's also an important call to action, and never more so than now, in the middle of a pandemic that is being experienced, as you heard from Mayor Nenshi, so unevenly on the ground. You know, in 2016, Tamarack hosted a summit that brought local leaders together with people with lived experience of poverty. And that coming together has had a truly lasting impact. Since then, Tamarack Cities Reducing Poverty, which I just heard the renaming of, it has grown to touch more than 300 Canadian municipalities, and the network is making a real and tangible difference. Fundamentally, the network recognizes the key role that mayors play as champions of poverty reduction. And today, I'm so pleased to be here with three mayors who have been real leaders in local efforts to end poverty. Mayor Fred Eisenberger from Hamilton, Mayor Bernadette Clément from Cornwall, and Mayor Darren Canna from Chatham-Kent. We'll have an opportunity as the panel goes on to hear from each of these mayors about how poverty plays out in their communities. We'll hear how they're responding, and I expect we'll also hear how communities can't do it alone. Because poverty has complex roots and communities have limited tools, that's where Tamarack comes in. That's where everyone on this call comes in. And that's certainly where my organization comes in as well. FCM advocates federally for better tools for municipalities. We do that alongside our mayors like Fred, Bernadette, Darren here, and leaders from 2,000 cities and communities across Canada. And I just want to share one recent example, and actually Mayor Nenshi touched on it, so I'll be really quick talking about this, but it shows you what's possible when we join forces on a national scale. And as many of you know, local leaders have been working flat out to keep vulnerable Canadians safe during the pandemic. And that includes being on the front lines of the daily struggles to stay safe on the streets, in shelters, in tent cities. Early on, cities were turning arenas into COVID-safe shelters, doing things like that, but they wanted to do better in this pandemic, but also beyond it. And so people came together. FCM, mayors, community leaders, housing providers, and out of that came the idea Mayor Nenshi spoke about to create permanent affordable housing for people as fast as possible through a really unconventional partnership. And the idea was to buy up and convert buildings that were available at pandemic low prices, including motels and rooming houses, and to convert those into deeply affordable and supportive housing. Similarly, another path using modular housing on available land. And so by October, with a lot of joint advocacy from community leaders, like so many of you on this call, and mayors, side by side, shoulder to shoulder. The government launched the $1 billion Rapid Housing Initiative, which is delivering permanent housing to more than 5,000 people facing chronic homelessness. Last month's federal budget added another $1.5 billion. This is all really positive. Though I want to be really clear, to meet our shared ambition and to your rename of this network to end chronic homelessness in this country, much more is going to be required. And so FCM and our mayors are going to continue advocating on this. The point, though, is that it's a national program. It works because it empowers local expertise. It puts tools in local hands to tackle the real local needs. And it only exists because local leaders came together to advocate for a tool that can work for everyone. It's one approach, one of many, that we need to tackle the deeply rooted, systemic, racialized reality of poverty. But this principle of working together to drive progress and that it remains inherently local is really a helpful one, and a helpful one to sort of seed the conversation today. Over the last year, communities across Canada have led really innovative action with local partners to tackle systemic challenges from housing to mental health. And for more on that, I'm so pleased to get right on into it with the mayors. And I'll start. I have targeted questions for each of you mayors, which will hopefully give you some opportunity to respond to everything you've heard this morning as well. And then if time allows, we'll also get into some questions generally for the full panel. And Mayor Eisenberger, I'm going to start with you. In Hamilton, you've been a real leader in poverty reduction for a number of years. Paul referenced this in your impact in his remarks. Can you tell us why it's so important for municipal governments to be involved in this work from your perspective?
Thank you very much, Carol, and thank you to Tamarack for continuing the drive to ending poverty. A new moniker, which I think is appropriate, because there needs to be an end to this. It can't be just reducing it. There has to be an end game. You know that municipal governments and local governments, in many ways, are the government of first choice. We're closest to the people. When there are problems in our community, whether they're provincial, federal, or municipal. We get calls to the mayor's office, or we get calls to the municipal councilors' offices. Those issues all and ultimately land on the ground in our large major urban centers, and all of our urban centers. And that kind of accessibility is critically important because we can see what's happening in our community day to day. We see the encampments that have come as a result of the pandemic, and prior to that were happening. We can see the shelter challenges and the amplified by the pandemic, surely, but clearly those shelter issues and housing issues have been with us for quite some time. And so there's a need to really put a strong, collaborative, coordinated effort into trying to get on top of this. And I think you laid out, many of the ways that we do that. In Hamilton, as I spoke in 2017 when we had the conference here in Hamilton, universal basic income is still very much, I think, the ultimate answer to providing a stable platform for individuals in our community, providing a decent standard of living for everyone in the country, is the way that we are going to get on top of these poverty and housing issues. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Hamilton was one of 4 communities in Ontario that were designated to be a pilot for universal basic income. And sadly, a new government came in and canceled it, but we do know that it was working here in Hamilton. We do have evidence of that. McMaster University did ongoing research as it was developing as to how that tool was being, helping provide stable housing platforms, helping provide stable income for individuals, not forcing them to make choices between rent and food. Those additional guaranteed dollars made such a huge difference in the stability of individuals in our community. So we continue to advocate for that. That's, I think, critically important going forward. As a local government, we are working on many different platforms, for housing supports, individual supports through social services, affordable housing, as you just spoke of. We're seeing now a multitude of creative ways that we can provide more affordable housing more quickly. And some of them are taking existing buildings that are underutilized or under undercapitalized, and taking them on as opportunities for new affordable housing opportunities. So just recently, the federal government did step up in Hamilton. I'm sure they're stepping up across the country. $148 million of grants and forgivable loans coming to our affordable housing, Hamilton City Housing Platform. That will help make 6,000 units in our community more livable. So many of them have not had the repairs that they require, and that certainly is going to give quite a boost. And then to turn back to the $50 million commitment we made a few years ago to address specifically poverty and housing has inspired many projects and rapid housing projects and others that otherwise might not have happened by offsetting development charges and offsetting, future taxes, tax deferrals, all kinds of ways to make what could have been unviable projects viable. And that has made a significant difference in our community. So local municipalities are going to be the key as to how we make that happen. But of course, and as you point out very accurately, we don't do it without the strong advocacy of FCM with our federal government and AMO locally here in Ontario. We need that coming together of resources because, as most of the advocates of housing know, it is very expensive to build new affordable housing. And so that expense has to be done not necessarily on the back solely of municipal taxpayers, but it has to be a coming together of governments to actually bring that forward. So I really see today more opportunity, more investments happening, more collaboration happening in that space than we've ever seen before. And I hope that will continue.
Thanks very much, Mayor Eisenberger. It's really energizing to hear the kind of moment of opportunity you're describing, given sort of the coalescing of energy and attention, and really the lessons we're learning in the harshest of ways throughout this pandemic as well. And so I want to sort of speak to the moment of being able to use this moment of opportunity to push forward, but also the necessity of to be thinking long term and to be planning accordingly. And Mayor Clement, this is where I really hope to bring you in. Cornwall's poverty reduction work is tied into your Vibrant Communities Plan, which was developed jointly with the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas and Glengarry, the City of Cornwall, and the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne. And as a leader in developing the strategy, can you tell us a little bit about the process of developing a joint strategy, the role of connecting local work to your provincial mandate, and how that came together?
Hello, everyone. Bonjour. I'm really happy to be here. I am in my office at City Hall, downtown Cornwall, but I am also sitting on the traditional territory of the Mohawk people of Akwesasne. A couple of shout outs before I say a few things. So picture this, 2006, Cornwall is a pulp and paper mill town. We had the smell of paper in the air. We called it the smell of money. And in 2006, Domtar closed. And we wondered as a community what we would do to get through that challenge. And it was a time for the provincial government to reach out to us, give us some money and say, do something for yourselves that's going to help. And we created at that point the Social Development Council. We didn't have one. We talk about economic development, but you also have to talk about social development. And so that council has been up and running for a number of years now. And so my shout out is first to Councillor Hébert. So she's a city councillor, but she's also the executive director of the Social Development Council. And it's quite powerful to have that kind of voice embedded into a council. So shout out to her. I ran for politics in 2006, in part because of that, because representation matters. But also, here's my second shout out. I'm also a legal clinic lawyer. So I have worked as a poverty lawyer for the last 30 years, and I still enjoy doing that. But the relentless casework was getting me down. And I felt that being on a municipal council would help from a more systemic way. So shout out now, third one, to Tamarack. Back a few years ago, Vibrant Communities, in partnership with the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, which had done great work on the social determinants of health, along with Councillor Hébert and the Social Development Council, partnered to create Vibrant Communities. And it was a very exciting time. 100 people came forward from all the right sectors with all the right amount of passion to start working on poverty reduction. And to your point, Mayor Eisenberger, yeah, we should start talking about ending poverty and not reducing poverty. So they came together and started to work. And at the same time, the province was doing something really interesting as well. And they were mandating that municipalities have a community and safety well-being plan in Ontario, mandating that. So we thought, okay, we don't want to have overlap. We have these 100+ people that are engaged. Let's bring that focus together with what the province was trying to do. So that meant bringing not only the city of Cornwall together, but also First Nation Akwesasne, Mohawk Council of Akwesasne, and the lower tier, the Stormont, Dundas, Glengarry United Counties. Now, regional work is always better. Working together is always better, but it's hard. It's hard. You get better results, but you have to go through the process. So we really worked, and again, Social Development Council worked hard to make sure that all three councils, Mohawk Council, SDG, County Council, and Cornwall Council, made the proper motions and the proper political buy-ins to bring all of those folks together. And what followed was, is, I think, a thing of beauty. So we have vibrant communities, community safety, well-being, all together, all three political entities on board. And these same 100 people have become more people, more passionate people. So we have a plan. I'll show it to you. So you've all seen these plans as municipal officials. We don't want the plans to sit on shelves and get dusty. Looks great. We got some money to brand ourselves, to bring in Le Français, Mohawk language, English, to make sure that we had a real diverse feel that reflected what was going on. And now we have identified 4 top strategies, 4 working tables that are working on an implementation plan. No surprise, top 4 priorities: mental health, access to health services, poverty, and community safety, well-being. And so that's where we are. And we have lots of people working. We did some incredible community engagement, most of it pre-pandemic, by the way, and we can talk about that later in terms of the impact of the pandemic, but a lot of it in-person surveying, going to every place, the powwow, the arenas, the community events, to actually engage with people in person, and got a lot of good information from people from every sector, from every demographic. So the work continues.
Thanks very much, Mayor Clement. I'm glad you're both keeping it real in terms of the challenges and difficulties of doing that kind of joint coordinated work. And to your point, the importance of engagement and really raising awareness around the initiatives to be able to do that successfully. And Mayor Caniff, I know that this has been a big part of the work that you're doing in Chatham's poverty reduction efforts. I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit more about that. And specifically building on the importance of municipal leaders working to raise awareness around poverty and actions to end poverty in their community.
Certainly. Thanks, Carol. It certainly is a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank Tamarack for inviting me. And it's certainly a privilege to sit on the panel with Mayor Eisenberger and Mayor Clement, the 2 big leaders in the province of Ontario to end poverty, not just to slow it down, to end it, poverty. I like the idea of that. So briefly, I just want to give a quick background of Chatham-Kent. Maybe a lot of people across the country be saying, Chatham-Kent, what is, I've never heard of the place, or I vaguely know what it is. We're in southwestern Ontario. We're a population a little over 100,000. We were amalgamated with 23 different communities back in 1998. There's a lot of small communities around. We were put into one municipality. So we're a little over 100,000 people, Chatham being the main community of approximately half the population if you take Chatham and surrounding area. So we certainly have a lot of rural. Farming there is a big business here in Chatham-Kent. So we also share some history with Cornwall to an extent, is that back in 2006, Navistar was a major employer. They had up to 2,000 employees. They produced trucks here, and they closed. So not only did those 2,000 jobs go, but all the feeder plants and stuff. So between 2006 and 2016, based on census data, we lost almost 7 or 8% of our population because of unemployment. People were moving elsewhere to get jobs. So we've very much experienced a similar experience to what Cornwall was. We had to rebuild ourselves. Fortunately, we are in a process that we are now expanding significantly our population and businesses coming back. But through we had a lot of social issues during that. One thing I want to highlight particularly is that the mentality of our community, of our council, is dealing with poverty is an investment in your community. It's not a cost. So it's the same as infrastructure. As far as building bridges, roads and stuff, we build that for the future to ensure that people are housed, to ensure people have solid mental health. All of those things are investment in our community. So I believe council as a whole here has that mentality that it's an investment in our community. I attended the conference in 2017 in Hamilton when Mayor Eisenberger announced the $50 million. That, to me, I was councillor at the time, true inspiration, kind of saying, really, this is what we need to be doing. So we've been doing a lot in Chatham-Kent as far as investing, and our council is very accepting of that as far as saying, yes, we need to invest in our community. Given our rural nature and our smaller community, we've had the ability to be more nimble. Like when we need to do things, it's easier to work with the parties around to make changes and various things like that. The one big thing we value here in Chatham-Kent is employment. Given our history, that in order for somebody to get out of poverty, they need a job. So we've worked very hard across our community with hundreds of employers to create job opportunities for people in Chatham-Kent. Like, we're proud as we've led the province in moving people from social assistance to employment. We've worked very hard in that, getting those people that were unemployed back in 2006 and ensuring we employ, because it's a key piece to that. And certainly rural or council leaders form an extremely important part in driving elimination of poverty. It starts from the top, and because if council isn't paying much heed to it and not investing in it, there's not much else going to happen. So it's great to see in our community there's so many councillors step behind it. In fact, one of our councillors was the CEO of United Way for a number of years, so she brings that in. We have a lot of people that type of background, so you see that actively happening at council consistently. Motions coming forward to deal with issues that we're having across the community and investing municipal dollars in it. We have a prosperity roundtable here, and I'm going to talk briefly about partnerships. That is the other critical piece to me of dealing with poverty, is we need to work together. Right at the municipal level, working with United Way, the prosperity roundtable brings together 70 or 80 different organizations in our community to talk about what are the pressing issues and lobby for them, push for them. They provide recommendations to council on a consistent basis, which we generally work with and put that investment in. So working with that, working with business leaders, working across the community, then working with other communities. We've done some work with our neighbors in Lambton County and Windsor Essex, working on different things for supports for workers, for the PSW program, for instance. We've been doing that. So partnerships are an absolute critical piece of taking this and working with the feds, I wanted just working with other municipalities. I love the R&D approach, rob and duplicate. When Hamilton or Cornwall is doing something great, let's go copy off them. So that's the beauty of this conference, is we can come together and experience those things that other communities are doing. So it is so important that municipalities are behind this. So I thank Tamarack for putting this together, and they realize the power of municipalities. As was mentioned earlier, we are on the forefront of it. We see when tent cities are being built and all that. So I'm thrilled to be part of this, and let's all be part of the solution together.
Thanks very much, Mayor Caniff. I'm so pleased that you brought into the equation here the importance of really bold, ambitious, maybe even unconventional partnerships to really drive forward some progress on a goal as ambitious, but as tenable and tangible as ending poverty as we go forward. I was hoping to ask you related to that, ask the whole panel a couple of questions, and given our time, I might try to merge them. I was looking to hear from you a little bit on policies or strategies you think can be accelerated to support local poverty reduction, given the moment that we're in. And that moment being in the midst of what has been a really devastating pandemic, particularly for those experiencing poverty or homelessness. And so wondering as well from your perspective, what can we do to take faster action right now? And what are you hoping for as a frame for poverty reduction coming out of COVID? And what is going to be our best approach given that context? And so maybe I'll open it up with that kind of a frame to the panel for any of the mayors who want to jump in.
Be happy to, Carol. And so, one of the challenges we continue to face as approvals are required, and they're required actually more speedily now as a result of the pandemic, is the work of CMHC. And I'm not going to pick on them, but the reality is that there's a pretty robust approvals process that is way too long for the developer to be waiting to get approvals if we're doing a partnership with local communities here that are all anxious to get going. We see numbers of housing developments in the queue that could be approved but are backlogged by CMHC approval. So I'd say that's one area that we need to tackle if we're going to work on rapid housing and work on the kind of demand that's out there. We need to kind of export the ability to get approvals much more quicker, much more efficiently, all within law, of course. And we're trying to throw away any important issues that we need to deal with, but there's got to be a faster, more efficient process. The second piece is, and I'll harp on this, maybe consistently, is for all intents and purposes, we are delivering universal basic income right now. The last time I spoke to the Prime Minister about this, I had an aside at one of our meetings, and I said, why are you not spending time? This is pre-pandemic. Why are you not spending time looking at, picking up the ball that the provincial province had dropped, but picking up the ball in terms of universal guaranteed income? And his answer at the time was kind of, well, we've got other priorities and there's lots of other things going on. And then lo and behold, we run into a pandemic. And what's happening now is that for all intents and purposes, a vast amount of people in our country are getting resources that otherwise would have caused our country to collapse, and their household incomes to collapse, and their ability to put food on the table to collapse. And so the lesson of basic income, I think, is staring us in the face right now. And so what is that going to do for the marginalized in our communities, where the gap gets bigger? We have far more people working at precarious employment jobs. They may not even show up on the poverty line. They may be just at that threshold, but they have 3 jobs to be able to stay there. And they have to have a decent housing opportunity. And the cost of that housing, not through any fault of any governments, is escalating significantly right across the country. And so we have a kind of perfect storm happening here of challenges for our everyday citizens to be able to manage their way through not only the pandemic, but the post-pandemic effects that are going to be with us for quite some time. And doesn't that then scream out for continued supports for individuals in our community that are not getting the kind of standard of living that's going to keep them healthy, keep them well? I sometimes think that doctors ought to be able to prescribe housing for people that are having mental health and health issues, because that platform really makes a huge difference. And the same would apply to universal or guaranteed basic income. The doctor's prescription would be, your life would be so much better if you had the ability to get the resources that you need, and that you're unable to get them on your own through no fault of your own. Isn't it a wise prescription to be able to provide for those individuals that can't provide for themselves? So those areas, I think, are key learnings from the pandemic for sure. And if we fail to learn the lesson post-pandemic, then I think we have squandered a crisis.
Indeed. Well, and I'll just underscore your message about the partnership and opportunity. If we can work with CMHC to go forward. I think this is why we bring the Rapid Housing Initiative up as often as we do, because we were able to work really collaboratively in an unprecedented way, really, with CMHC to help design a program that was going to be able to move fast to meet the urgency of the crisis. And so being able to scale that thinking, not only with the Rapid Housing Initiative and scale it up, but also that kind of, let's push the boundaries, let's see what we can do to scale the innovation around some of these other programs that have just been reinvested in, so that we can move some dollars really quickly. To your point, Mayor Eisenberger, is really critical. Mayor Clement, Mayor Caniff, wondering if you have anything to add in the context of COVID, the urgency of the moment. What are you hoping that can be actionable in terms of poverty reduction in a quick way?
Sure. I applaud all of Mayor Eisenberger's comments, by the way, about universal basic income and exploring that, continuing to explore that. We struck a housing task force. Also, to your point, Mayor Eisenberger, it's urgent. And so we're bringing all key players to focus on that. Our council has determined that as a priority. Around the urgency, I think we need to focus, and we are doing that, on lived experience information. So our community has started a lived experience advisory committee. So a panel of 11 people that are paid a living wage to share their lived expertise. And we will learn from them in terms of what is urgent. Mayor Nenchi's story this morning of the bus pass, right? And the reduction of the cost of that. Those are things that as municipalities, we need to hear from people who are living the experience to determine, okay, we have our set of priorities, what's most urgent. And I would say that when we had our 4 pillars in our community, so mental health, health services, poverty, and community safety, there was a thread throughout: housing, of course, but the other thread was a sense of belonging, a sense of needing to feel like they belong, that their neighbors have their back, that we've got each other's back. And so as a municipality, we need to focus on infrastructure that supports that. So the playground stuff, the picnic tables, painting bright things, making sure that these things are accessible and are free and bring people together so that everybody feels like we are truly in this together. I know we all have different boats. We are hearing that a lot. But I mean, at least if we are able to participate as families in our community, then that's something that our municipality should be supporting. And so we're going to our lived experience experts, we're paying them, we're integrating all different sectors together to figure out what's urgent from an infrastructure perspective, from a municipal perspective.
Fabulous. Fantastic, Mayor Clement, hearing about that lived experience task force that you've set up. What an important design element to the thinking that your council will be doing. And Mayor Caniff, to your point, you redefined R&D and approach to rob and deliver. That's the kind of thinking that we have an ability to really spread across the country. Wondering, Mayor Caniff, from your perspective, hearing these 2 mayors, they've both sort of pulled on the thread that you were making earlier about the importance of a broader interpretation of infrastructure if we're really going to be ambitious about ending poverty here. Wondering if you want to sort of contextualize that in the current context of COVID as it relates to your community.
Yeah, I just want to, I certainly wholeheartedly agree with Mayor Eisenberger and Mayor Clement as to what their points are about income support. That's a critical piece, and we're living it right now. And when you see that there's virtually 0 bankruptcies happening across the country, those type of things, you can see it has a very positive impact. Talk about daycare, transportation, housing. Those are all infrastructure things that we need. A couple of things that weren't mentioned, I just want to add, is improved digital access, particularly in rural areas. We've run into with schooling from home. Number of people have been completely disconnected, and it's basically based on income. If you can't afford to pay in rural areas, pay a pretty hefty amount to get that, you're not tying into school. So it's one of those isolation things that we need to deal with as a country. And then I know we're putting a lot of money into it. We're dealing with that. Better mental health and substance abuse programs. When you look across, when people get addicted to and those type of things. What sort of mechanisms are there to help get people out of it? And there's certainly, I don't tell everyone, there's gaps in the process across the country and from where you live. The other piece is prevention. I know it's not going to help today, tomorrow, next week, but we need to be looking at what prevention programs are in place and emphasizing those. There's some very simple things that the provinces can do and the federal government can do to instantly make a difference in prevention, and it's not going to cost them anything to do. But my daughter, for instance, she got her wisdom teeth out at 18, and guess what she got? An opiates prescription for her pain. I'm thinking it makes no sense when 80% of people addicted to opiates are getting it through prescriptions. So I pose that we need looking to the future for that. I have the privilege of sitting on the Ontario Big City Mayors, and I'm co-chairing with the Mayor of Burlington to a task force on mental health. And our objective is to write a letter to the province of what we can do to improve mental health in Ontario, and really looking at an opportunity to provide the province with practical solutions. When you look at how much the province spends on mental health and things, they spend billions and billions. How can they spend that money better? We can't go to them and say it's time to spend another $100 billion. They don't have it. But if we can look at practical solutions, if there's 4 different ministries working on this, why not consolidate to one? Why not speed up the approval process, as Mayor Eisenberger talked about? There's a whole number of things we can do to take the existing money we're spending on all that and improve on it. So we have, I love what you just, Mayor Eisenberger said about let's not waste waste a pandemic as far as learning from it, and let's come out of this better. There's so many opportunities. So look forward to taking advantage of that report, and hopefully there's some big changes, at least in Ontario, from that perspective. Thanks.
Thanks, Mayor. And it's so interesting as you're talking, talking about the intersection of the various programs, that you think about that and how exacerbated that is about the necessity of coordination between orders of government. A federal program is only as good as the wraparound supports that are going to come, that are a provincial mandate, and only as effective as they are informed by local experience and lived experience and the ability of municipal leaders to implement locally. And so you really just, I think, very effectively underscoring where we started in this conversation about the necessity of real collaboration, of real urgent collaboration and meaningful intersection across the board from policymakers as we go forward. Also, really pleased you brought in the aspect of rural broadband access. This has been a priority for rural communities, really, truly across the country. And digital poverty is a significant contributor to one's ability to really access supports, both from a health perspective, a mental health perspective, education, public safety. It's often so often looked at as a quality of life. People think about Netflix, and I think we're all learning in real time now how critical a support it really, really is. And so I really appreciate you bringing that into the conversation as well. We have a few more minutes here, and I'm going to give you each a moment, I think, maybe to collect some thoughts and close with your summation, what you hope to leave the 700 folks who are gathered throughout this conference from each of your city's perspective. Mayor Eisenberger, maybe I'll start with you if you're willing to go first, and I'll pass it over to you for some wrap-up commentary.
Great, thank you, Carol. And you know what, a great session. We learned from one another, from individual communities across the country. That's what these great sessions are really all about, is how do we not all have to reinvent the wheel? How do we learn from one another? And I think that's a great opportunity to do that today through these great sessions. Tamarack has been and continues to be the lead in terms of working at ending poverty now, which I'm really, really grateful for. And that work is so important. So the New Testament says that the poor will always be with you. Well, I don't see that as a prophecy. I see that as an observation. So in 2021, it's not enough to simply accept poverty as something that will and somehow must be part of our social and economic landscape. So it's something that we need to take seriously, and we take responsibility for. We need to fight against the ultimate poverty that begins and ends where it is found, right here in our municipalities with individuals in our community. I can tell you that my own personal experience, very briefly, is social housing. So as an immigrant family coming to the country, it was affordable housing was provided by the municipality. Were it not for that, There was no way that our parents could have provided enough stability and resources to provide for the next generation to become whatever they become, a part of the middle class, mayor, steelworkers, whatever that may be. That's the pattern that has evolved for many generations, and that need is still very much out there, and in fact is growing. So we can eliminate homelessness, we can eliminate hunger, we can end poverty. All we need to do is put the right tools together. And some of those tools we've talked about today, whether it's CMHC or the federal government and their resources, the province, our collective own resources, how do we rededicate funds that we are taking in to deal with some of those issues as part of that equation? And then how do we bring in the private sector, the lived experience folks, and others that are willing and able to help us restore the housing needs in our community. I think that partnership will make all the difference in the world. And fortunately, we are now seeing numerous developers carving out a space in the affordable housing sector, and that's a really good sign, because there is some profitability there. There is an ability for them to make some money, but they can also provide a community service at the same time. So I see the need coming together to hopefully get us to a point in the near future where we can actually end poverty.
Thanks, Mayor Eisenberger. Great message, both about partnership and already having the tools. And, it struck me as you're talking about the action we're seeing from some developers now as well. Really just noting to the audience, given who we have with us today, that we all know that didn't just come to be. That's the result of a lot of hard work and advocacy from many folks standing together really in solidarity to push for that kind of action. So the importance for continued community pressure and advocacy can't be understated. Mayor Caniff, maybe I'll turn to you next for closing thoughts.
Certainly. Let's switch up the order a little bit. Sure. You put me on the spot.
Sorry.
Yeah, just the key message that comes out of here, and I've mentioned it before, is working together. When we look at what the feds spend, the province, the municipality, the social agencies and everything, imagine a world where we all come together and we're working as one, and there's no overlaps. We're all doing what we need to do. That's what this whole conference is about. So this is what excites me about. You mentioned 700 people across the country bringing their expertise and things, coming together to make that. We as municipalities are the face of the people who live in our community. Now is the time to be advocating. The federal and provincial governments are open for change. They're looking for solutions. And if we as municipalities can provide those solutions to those upper levels of government, this is the time they're willing to listen. So it's so important that we advocate and get those messages to those levels of government, is this is the time to change. And I really believe that in the next few years, we'll have made a huge difference in poverty in the country, working towards eliminating it. Well, I won't give the elimination in 4 years, maybe a little longer than that, but I live for the day that we don't have that in our country. Thanks.
Thanks, Mayor Caniff. And Mayor Clement, I saved you for last because I also wanted to just take a moment. You are a trailblazer in many rights, and to acknowledge and really shine a light and lift you up. You are the first Black woman to be the mayor of your city, and you've spoken so much about the importance of representation, about the importance of bringing in lived experience, and so really just wanted to have a moment to really lift you up in that regard as well. And I'll pass it over to you for now for your closing thoughts.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you to all the conference organizers. This is wonderful. It's an honor to be on screen with my colleague mayors. And thank you to the people of Cornwall who put me in this chair and allow me to participate in the way that I do. Mayor Nenshi said today, my neighbor's strength is my strength. And so that's very powerful. I'm going to say that a lot in the coming weeks. We have to honor the losses that have taken place during this pandemic. And to honor those losses means, to my colleagues' points, we have to work together. And the togetherness is very complicated. The intersectionality is uncomfortable sometimes. But now is the time to lean into that complexity. I mean, we saw that with Black Lives Matter. It was difficult. It continues to be difficult, but we all leaned into that more than we're used to. And that's a good thing. And it means that we can be more open to talk about the hard things. You know, Maclean's magazine voted Cornwall as in the top 10 places to live. So that's great. As a mayor, as a council, we're proud. We want to cheerlead. We want to talk about economic development, but that's useless if we're not also talking about social development, if we're not also talking about poverty. So we can't be shy to lean into talking about the hard things, the things that make us uncomfortable as community leaders, right? As sellers of our community. It's very difficult. But I'm inspired by the bravery and courage that I hear from my colleagues, and especially from the people in our communities with lived experience who are stepping forward to talk to us and tell us what they need. We need to be listening and leaning in. And c'est ça qu'on va faire. Alors, je vous remercie pour l'inspiration et la chance de participer aujourd'hui. Merci.
Merci à vous, Mairesse Clément. And thank you, everybody. Folks, you've just seen a real-time example of why I think I've got the best job in the country. I have the real honor of working with such thoughtful local leaders from right across this country. And I can tell you, in all sincerity, as challenging as this year has been, as we all try to work through what is an incredibly difficult context with this pandemic, the inspiration too is there to be found. I am seeing it from communities across the country, from our members, from mayors and councillors, but also from community leaders. And so many of you are leading this work in your communities, work that is hard, work that is sometimes thankless, work that is complicated and difficult and complex to approach. And it is really, truly incredibly inspiring and gives me confidence as I get the privilege of having a bird's eye view of across the country efforts that this is within reach. And as you've heard from this panel today, there is a real commitment at a local government level to continue the push. So a very big thank you to Tamarack for hosting us this conversation today. It's really an honor for me to be here alongside these fabulous mayors. And I'll just end with where I started. Paul, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Really, we couldn't have asked for a better champion over the course of your career, and we wish you all the best in your next chapter. Thanks very much. Back over to you, Shauna and Brock.
Thanks so much, Carol. Thanks so much, Mayors. That was a really wonderful panel. It was really insightful and ground level, very practical stuff. And Carol, I do agree with you. You have the best job in the country. I can relate to that personally. But I thought that the other thing that was really important for me was the comment that you started off with, Carol, that ending poverty is inherently local. And, local leaders are key, but you can't do it alone. You need collaborators, you need partners, you need leadership from federal and provincial government. We all demonstrated that very, very clearly. So thanks again. It was a wonderful panel. So now I'd like to introduce two of Tamarack board members, Karen Nolan and Adoma Patterson, who were recognized from the CRP video for closing reflections today. Carrie is a community coordinator and outreach worker with the Yukon Anti-Poverty Coalition. Within her role, Carrie applies her lived experience relating to homelessness, poverty, food insecurity, social injustice, and social exclusion to supporting her community's most vulnerable. I should add that Carrie, in her contributions to the board discussions around the Tamarack board, always brings a great level of sincerity and sort of ground level truth and perspective to the topics that we're discussing. So, and Carrie, we'll hear from you in just a second. The second Tamarack board member I'd like to introduce is Adoma Patterson. Adoma is currently the manager of poverty reduction and community engagement at the region of Peel, where she leads the implementation of a 10-year poverty reduction strategy and supports the initiatives that increase community safety and well-being for residents in Brampton, Mississauga, and Caledon. Also, when I think of Adama around the board table at Tamarack, whenever Adama speaks, there's this calm that comes over the conversation, and she's so clear and precise and thoughtful with her comments. It just advances all of our discussions. So we'd ask each of you to take a couple of minutes and just reflect on what your thoughts are from what you've heard so far today. So maybe we could start with you, Carrie. Okay, so time just, as I said, Carrie is dialing in from the Yukon and has some real ground truthing experiences to share with us in this moment. Carrie, you good to go?
Yeah, I'm good to go. Thanks, Brock. So I just want to let everybody know I am joining you from Whitehorse, Yukon. I'm sitting in the traditional territories of the Kwanlundun First Nations and Toan-Gwitchin Council. Nice sunny day here today, still morning. I'm not sure you guys are all in the afternoon. Yeah, I've taken a lot from the discussions this morning. Many things. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Brock, Shauna, Adoma, and all the rest of the board members of Tamarack. Paul for his great encouragement this morning and talking about his retirement and how he's going to involve with us. So a lot of things this morning that I've taken from, I'd like to highlight again is all the discussions about having people of lived living experience sitting on the boards, decision-making tables. Myself, I've been able to take my lived experience and share it on the Tamarack board member, which is a great honor for me to do. And I encourage everybody else, if you have stories, if you have something to say about ending poverty, ending homelessness in our country, around the world, use your voice, speak it up, use your experiences to make the conversations real, to bring grounding to these conversations. It's a huge way to accent what goes on at the ground level of these discussions. Many things that I've heard as well about racism, anti-racism, Mayor Nenshi mentioning community building within public health, mental health and addictions, economic environment and racism. These are all things that add to poverty in our country. These are things we need to talk about, these difficult conversations, and keep them flowing, keep them moving. This is how we're going to make changes. As Mayor Nenshi mentioned as well, COVID has shown us the cracks in some of these systems. These systems can change. They've brought us to this point, decisions. We need to make other decisions to take us out of this, not just the pandemic, but of poverty in all aspects. What else did I take? Oh, many good things. My neighbor's strength is my strength. What a great way to highlight that. We need to pick each other up, hold each other high, and just keep building on everybody's expertise. Listen with the open heart, open mind. We will move forward. We will move forward and end poverty. Using language. Language is a big thing when you're discussing and engaging people with lived experience. So changing cities, reducing poverty. Bit of a negative there, poverty, to communities ending. How great is that? Conferences with over 1,000 people in a 3-day period. Absolutely amazing. I myself, I'm very engaged. I like the interaction. However, I'm getting used to Zoom as well, but I am definitely hoping that our next meeting we'll be able to meet in person. And yeah, take from these workshops and stuff, everything that you can. Take them from this conversation we're having here out to the communities, out to other boards, out to other members of society, and we will make a difference. We will make change.
Thanks very much, Carrie. I really appreciate this, particularly that focus on words, that words really matter. We need to be very careful about how we choose the words and the terminology that we bring forward so that we can all go forward together without biases and with progress. Thanks very much. Adama, you have a few thoughts you want to share?
Absolutely, and thanks to all of you. It's such a joy to serve with you on the Tamarack board. You know, I've been attending Tamarack conferences for a number of years, and they've always given me the opportunity to challenge my thinking, test my assumptions. And I really like that we started by saying no judgment, right? People's lives are important, their stories are important. And I think that's really so much of what I heard this morning. Communities ending poverty, right? So in some ways, so long overdue, right? The bar has not been high enough in Canada when we talk about the struggle that many, many people face. And I think that that one word change is powerful and crucial. And COVID has taught us that it's possible. We've learned so much this past year, just in listening to the mayors and Mayor Nenshi, that change can happen. Really, when we want change to happen, it can happen. That rapid housing initiative that the federal government implemented, was a push. We've been talking about homelessness for forever. And through COVID, the challenges that people who are experiencing homelessness face were magnified. And the solutions we were able to hammer out. Our leadership, leaders matter. The mayors who are so passionate about this work, passionate about the residents that they serve. And one of the mayors talked about municipalities and the important role that we play as municipal leaders and municipal staff. We are on those front lines. We do see any change that happens in a neighborhood and community. Municipalities, municipal leaders, councillors see that first. And it is crucial that municipal government, as we heard, stay involved, stay on the leading, work with advocates and residents in the community to keep pushing for change. So really liked that I heard leadership matters, that collaboration, that working together, even if we have differences of opinions, that it's the differences of opinions, like the common ground we can find, that is crucial to the things that we want to see, the vision of ending poverty. Mayor Nenshi talked about sort of the longstanding issues. We're in a public health crisis, but there's mental health and addiction crisis, environmental crisis, economic crisis, and racism. And those are tough conversations. I heard lean into talking about the hard issues. We often dance around the difficult conversations. The nice Canadians, we were polite, and yet it is the difficult conversations that we've had to have in this last year that really have helped move the needle. And so just looking forward to more of those difficult conversations. And finally, I've heard we cannot squander the crisis. Absolutely. It is so easy for us to go back to business as usual when, we're all hoping for a normal. We're all hoping to be able to see our family and friends. But COVID had some important lessons. And if we squander the crisis, then shame on us as this generation of leaders, activists, residents, people who experience poverty. This is our moment to, really push Canada and make it realize the vision that we all have of a community and society for all of us, where we can live. We don't have to worry about that bus pass costing $45 or $5. That we can feed ourselves and our families, that we don't have to think about whether I pay the rent this month and then I have to sacrifice for something else, where our children, regardless of who you are, whether you're racialized, Indigenous, young, immigrant, newcomer, that you can, this is your country and that we can all own our space here. And we so deserve it. And as someone who is an immigrant, I know we still have work to do, and I want that vision for all of us. Wow.
Wonderful comments. Thanks, Adelma. It's really great, the emphasis on leaning into the hard issues and making sure that we take this moment of opportunity to advance the issues that are so important to our cultures and our communities. Anyway, thank you to both of you. You can see why, ladies and gentlemen, it's such a wonderful experience working on the Tamarack board. So I'll hand it back to you, Shauna.
I was actually thinking, Brock, the exact same thing. I feel so privileged, not just to work with Adelma and Carrie, to work with you, Brock, but there is this whole community of people that are behind Tamarack, and so many of them are with us today. And it's just, it feels like, I feel like these last few hours have been a part of being embraced by that community and being nurtured intellectually, and the ideas that are coming out. What an incredible morning so far, and day for some of you in Eastern Canada as well, that it's a little bit later in your days. It's still the morning for some of us in the West Side. I want to do a few announcements because we're coming to the end of our plenary time together. It's not the end of the summit today, because we still have the workshops. We're going to take a 30-minute break, and at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when the workshops begin in the Zoom meetings. Now, the links are found in the House-based chat box, and you'll see the workshop tabs at the top of the House-based homepage. So follow those. I want to remind everyone that we are going to reconvene tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. To those on the West Coast, yeah, that's a little early. That's 8 a.m. for us, but we'll be there, and we'll have a new group of people joining us. And there are going to be over 300 young people working on the communities building youth futures. These are people focused on youth engagement, youth leadership, and youth futures. Now, in the next few minutes, we are going to be uploading Asma's graphic recording from this morning's session. Now, during the break, as you're eating lunch, we would like you to go to Housebase and take a look at what Asma has created and interact. Ask Asma questions. She's going to be there. Now, there, under the graphic recording, there'll be a chat box where you can ask those questions. Brock, it's been a fabulous morning. I want to hand it over to you to close off before we head on to our break.
Thanks, Shauna. It has been a fabulous morning, and it's typical of what Tamarack does. It just delivers quality all the time. And just go back to what I said at the beginning of the day, that this is about learning to do things differently, to continue doing what you do, what works, and doing things differently. So as you're going through lunch, as you're thinking about the rest of your day, think about all you've heard this morning and think about what it is that inspires you to do something differently, to do something, take action, and how you're going to do that. Write it down. Tell it to a friend, tell it to your spouse, make a commitment. I mean, as Fred Eisenberger said, ending poverty, let's all be part of the solution. That we cannot, it's not enough to accept poverty, we have to take responsibility and act. So that's what we're calling on people to do. And this is a great morning for helping to develop those sets of thoughts and actions to move us all forward. So with that, I think we close off the morning and go to the half-hour break, and then we'll see you back at the workshops this afternoon.